All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Because Football. It's your host, Andrew. Today I'm here with Paul Gerald, originally of Oregon, of Memphis, currently calling to us from Madrid, Spain. Paul is the founder of Groundhopper Guides, a soccer travel agency that can help you plan trips, score tickets, or just consult with any questions or details you might need about your travels and your soccer adventures in Europe or in the UK. Paul's been over 200 matches as a fan and was also a professional travel writer and traveler for over 40 years. So, Paul, we're very happy to chat with you today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
You're calling us from Madrid, obviously originally from the United States, like myself. So I'm sure that there's been a variety of personal travel, soccer, football experiences through all of that. But I want to go back to the beginning for you. Like, what's your earliest memory of the beautiful game?
It was actually a television program which people of my generation will remember called Soccer Made in Germany. I don't know if you know about this, but for some reason in the 1970s and early 80s, there was I think it was 30 minutes a week highlight show from the Bundesliga hosted by a Welshman on American public television. I do not know how it happened, what the story was. But I just remember that once a week, you could go and watch Stuttgart play Bayern Munich or watch Hamburg play, whoever. And I have always loved to travel, and I literally used to watch Soccer Made in Germany with an encyclopedia, because that's how old I am, and an atlas. And I would be like, where is
Amazing.
Stuttgart? And what else can I learn about Stuttgart? And then I would learn who Karl-Heinz Rummenigge was, and I would learn of all these guys. And then occasionally, they would make references to, Hamburg just played Malmo in the European Cup on Wednesday, and I'm like, what does that mean? So, and then I would see the fans singing, and so the game was fun to watch, but mainly to me, I was just amazed. There was this whole world that opened up in which
100%.
crowds sing, and different cities, play each other, and different countries play each other. And then there's this thing called the World Cup. And it was just, yeah, the whole kind of world of soccer opened up, you know. So,
So cool. I can really identify with that because I remember as a kid, one of my favorite books was an atlas, to read and just see just the world in general. But then certainly, as you said, like the world of soccer is so detailed. It can be complex. I mean, I still remember trying to learn, okay, how different leagues work. And, I still get questions from people all the time of like, okay, so Messi, when he was playing for Barcelona, like he plays for Spain, right? He's like, no, he's Argentine. He plays for Argentina, but his club team is in Spain. And even just those distinctions, especially for Americans, don't come second nature. So I can really identify with that. And you kind of like delving into this world, almost this like Lord of the Rings esque, where we've got these totally different peoples and groups and everything. It's amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I've heard of the show, but I know that like even my dad would tell me, he remembers seeing some highlight shows of whether it's the Italian league or English league. And sometimes maybe you'd get like the scores in the newspaper,
Oh, yeah.
at least where he was, but really it was kind of limited to that kind of access. And
Yeah.
then, so from there, like, as you kind of were wrapping your head around and diving into this really wide world of football, were you playing much yourself? Were you like, was that popular in kind of your community? And were there any other people that you knew that were involved in the game as well?
Yeah, I started playing, I don't know, age 11, 12, somewhere in there. I was part of the kind of initial wave of Americans playing the game in that I was from the private school world in the 1970s. And, I played in the church league, and for like the local Presbyterian church that I guess we went to. And
Okay.
I liked it because I really had no particular athletic skills beyond the fact that I was tall and uh, like anything to do, like in baseball, I could play outfield and catch the ball, but I couldn't really throw it or hit it. So anything that went in the air, I just kind of instinctively knew where it was going to come down. So I became a goalkeeper because they don't have to
Okay.
run very much and you don't have to
Hmm.
use your feet. And I enjoyed it. And it was the only sport I had any ability at whatsoever. And then, on that team, there was a kid from England, and because I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, where FedEx is headquartered, and his mom or dad worked for FedEx. So this kid from Liverpool was on the team, and so he began to tell me, and this is, 1979, 1980, and
Okay.
I'll never forget, he told me that Nottingham Forest were the champions of Europe. And there was so much in that sentence that I did not understand. Like, wait,
Hmm.
what does that mean that there's a team called Nottingham Forest? What is champions of Europe? So then he told me stories of what I now know as the Merseyside Derby, and he told me stories about Rangers and Celtic up in Scotland. So again, the world kind of opened up.
Exactly.
And then by the time high school rolled around, my private high school in Memphis, there had a very good team and a very good coach, but with very high standards for off-season training and fitness preparation, et cetera. And I wanted no part of that because I was not going to go outside and exercise in the Memphis summer. So I shifted to my other dream, which was to become a sports writer. And so I began a newspaper career and started down that path instead. So,
Brilliant. Brilliant.
yeah.
Yeah. Nottingham Forest, when we talk about, this kind of fantasy world, I mean, that's a club name that seems to come right from, I don't know, was it Robin Hood in
Yeah,
Nottingham Forest, something, right? Exactly.
literally.
It's like that's a great example of what
Yeah.
we're talking about, of embarking into this whole kind of fantasy world of football.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
Very cool. But
now I
yeah.
know, having done some research now and watched all the videos, now I know who Brian Clough was,
Hmm.
and Peter Taylor. And now, I'm lucky enough to say that I have sat in the Brian Clough stand and looked across the way at the Peter
Amazing.
Taylor stand. And, I was like, yeah, when they beat Liverpool in the European semifinals in whatever, 1980 or 81, it was like right here. Like this is where it happened. It's kind of
Yeah.
amazing.
So cool. I know that's like a full circle moment for you, right? Like
Exactly. It
one of
really
your
was.
first, again, connections to the world of football through your English schoolmate, and then being there. That's amazing. So
Yeah. And then
very
looking
cool.
around and seeing people that are probably in their 70s and thinking like, that guy was probably here. That, that guy probably went to that game, you know? So yeah, full circle.
Yeah, very cool.
Yes.
So then at some point in high school, you kind of figured out that maybe playing the game was, you're kind of over that. We got into the writing and just being involved in documenting and everything.
Yep.
I always think about that because that's something I was interested too. As a young age, of again, it kind of went hand in hand with learning about the game, wanting to share stories and things about it. If we could take a quick little detour, if anyone's listening, maybe any kids, teenagers, or anyone adults who kind of has that dream of being a sports writer, what do you think is a skill, an ability, any advice for anyone who would want to go down that path?
Well, the standard joke is to be unemployable in all other respects. No, I mean, in my day, you go get a job at the newspaper. I don't even know if those exist anymore. So, yeah, I honestly would not know. I'm not sure sports writer is still a career anymore,
Right.
blogger, social media person, all, it has fanned out in so many directions now.
Hmm.
I'm old. I don't know how those things work.
Gotcha. The
But the
the
main thing
central
is,
thing would be the
is that the
storytelling,
way
right?
the way it was explained to me, my mentor in the sports writing business, he said, we send you out to cover a game, and whether it's a high school football game or whatever it might be, he said, there's something that is going to happen there that will be unique to that moment, that experience. And even if it's not like some grand thing that people talk about for years, there's something that's going to happen that game will be remembered for. And that's what you're looking for. Obviously you got to get the score right and spell out everybody's name and all that stuff. But,
Hmm.
that time that kid could have won the game, but his last second kick hit the goalpost. Like somebody's going to remember that forever. So
Hmm.
that's what you're looking for. So,
That's a great answer. Yeah, to kind of get at the core of what it's all about. And I think as far as maybe the avenues now, you're right. The traditional newspaper path is less common, but we do have, with the power of technology, social media, there's a lot of other ways. So if they want to do it, they just got to start their own thing or partner with people who are doing similar things. What was one of your first experiences of maybe going abroad and having the experience, the shared love and passion for the game of soccer that allowed you to kind of go deeper into a community, into a culture than you might have done just like simply as a tourist?
One of my earliest memories, actually, along those lines was, let's see, it would have been about January of 1990, and I was just doing the youth hostel backpack around Europe trip. Was in a pub in England and talking to some guys at the bar, and there was football highlights on television, and I didn't, by that point I had kind of gotten away from the game and wasn't paying any real close attention anymore. But these two guys at the bar next to me, one of them smacked the other one on the shoulder and said, "Look at Oldham." And I said, "What? What's Oldham?" And he then began to explain to me that Oldham Athletic had just beaten, I forget who, but they had just made the semifinals of the FA Cup. And again, I was like, what is Oldham? What's the FA Cup? But it led to this whole conversation of them explaining the cup to me and telling me stories about the cup and what it means that Oldham is about to play Manchester United in the FA Cup semifinal, and just how bizarre and exciting all of this is. So that wasn't even going to a game. That was just in a pub having somebody explain things to me.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I guess the first game that I remember going to was actually overseas anyway. I grew up going to Memphis Rogues games. Rest in peace. 1979 to 81, the worst team and the lowest attendance in the North American Soccer League. They
Wow.
averaged about
Yeah, I've not heard of the Rogues
There's a
actually.
good reason for that. Yeah. So, but what I do remember there, they averaged about 8,000 people a game, and just terrible. But they beat the New York Cosmos one time. That was exciting.
Their
So,
claim to fame. Yep.
yeah. But what I do remember about that is the coach of the Rogues, one of them, was a former Crystal Palace manager, a guy named Malcolm Allison. I didn't know any of this at the time. All I know is that Crystal Palace was on a preseason tour of the United States in 79 or 80 and played in Memphis. And I always wondered why. And I figured out later because their former manager was in Memphis.
Mm.
But I remember having watched a year or two of North American Soccer League in person, and then this other team shows up from England with these beautiful red and blue striped shirts, and they would kick the ball and it would go 40 yards across the field and land at the feet of the other guy who would immediately control it and pass it again. And I was like, wow. I didn't know you could do that. It was just the level, just in a preseason, whoever it was playing for
Yeah.
Palace, just the level of play was just, it was obvious inside of a minute. Like, this is something different. Um, yeah, so that was the first I saw of a foreign team. And then somewhere in the 90s, I guess I went to a game in Holland, you know, but I just remember it was really cold and I was really drunk. I don't remember a whole lot from that game. It was an Ajax
I'm sure a lot
game.
of football fans listening can identify, there's probably a
Absolutely. Actually,
solid
I take it
percentage
back.
of matches like that.
Yeah, it wasn't Ajax. It was Feyenoord. That's right. I remember now. But yeah, so I kind of eased my way into it until, oh gosh, 2011, visiting an old college friend in London, and her husband took me to an Arsenal game, and that's when it all kind of came back around.
Gonna
So
intensify.
set
Yeah.
set
So
me on the
cool.
path that I'm on now.
Yeah, when you bring up the story of being in the pub through my travels, whether it's you see someone wearing a shirt of a team or, with a certain player on it, or you just talk and even if the only words, even if you're in some place with completely different culture, completely different language, just that connection of the game, bring a smile, bring a high five, a handshake, like it's amazing what the game can do because it is so global. It's such a beautiful way to kind of bring people together. And you mentioned kind of then in 2011 where things seemed to, that passion maybe was really crystallized a bit and you kind of saw a bigger vision. So what was kind of that push to go from, hey, I'm just this American bopping around to different stadiums on my travels and trying to see matches and explore more of this wild world of football. What kind of switched for you to say, hey, I think I can be of help to people. I think I can provide something that is really in need.
Well, what had happened in my professional life in the meantime is that I had gone from sports writer for newspapers to freelance writer, first in sports, but then I branched out into writing about food and travel, etc. And then I began to write guidebooks after I'd moved to Portland, Oregon. I wrote hiking guidebooks. I wrote sort of guides to the city, this kind of thing. So my brain was beginning to look at the world for book ideas. right?
Mm.
And so he took me to a game at Arsenal, and I understood by this time I was going to Portland Timbers games. They were not MLS yet, but I was going to Timbers games, and I was kind of aware again of the world of soccer, and I certainly was aware of the Premier League, and by this time I knew what the Champions League was and the FA Cup and all that. So I went, he took me to a game. He actually asked, "Do you want to go to a game at Arsenal?" And I'm not kidding. My first response is, "Can we? Like, is that even real? Can you just go to a game?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm a member. I got a bunch of points. We'll go see him." And we saw him play Aston Villa. And yeah, being in the stadium, and this is when Arsenal was like unhappy, like the late
Hmm.
Wenger years, and they finished fourth again, and they lost that day to Aston Villa. And but the stadium, the crowd, the whole thing, it was just like this really exciting thing. So in my brain, I thought, okay, Americans like this. They want to know more about it. Like me, they don't really even necessarily think they can. Like, how the hell
Yeah.
would you go to an Arsenal game?
Right. Where to start?
Um, yeah, or is it even possible? And I was like, well, here I am at an Arsenal game, and he's teaching me all kinds of stuff about the experience. And I thought, so I could put all this together into a book and write about it and to explain, not the rules, but the culture. Sort of, I called it a travel and cultural guide to English soccer. Yeah, that was the original idea, was to write a book. And so that's when I really started going to games, because then I thought, okay, now I have an excuse to come
Hmm.
back over here
It's
and
work.
go to as many games as I can and call it a business expense.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
Love it.
yeah,
Brilliant. Brilliant.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
we're very kindred spirits in that sense. Because now with me doing YouTube and the podcast and everything, it's like it's really cool to see that initial just passion and enthusiasm for the game formulate and start to like more of a vision around that of what it can be, which is every day I kind of astound and surprise myself for the moment. Like when you're at Nottingham Forest, like wow, look at this, how this journey has kind of progressed. It's pretty cool. If I make a little quick detour for some people who might not know this term again, what is a ground hopper? What is ground hopping?
Yeah,
We know what hoppers are. It's similar.
right.
The brain might be going there, but could you clarify what that is?
Yeah, occasionally I still get called grasshopper. Right. First of all, Groundhopper, because of this question, was probably a bad name for a company, if your primary audience doesn't know what it means. But
Hmm.
I was looking for a word that could apply, all over the world, right? And so
Sure.
ground is, let's say it's the British equivalent of ballpark, right? So it technically means a place where games occur and is usually
Hmm.
applied to football in the United Kingdom. So a football ground. It's not the stadium, it's just the whole place. And so the stadium is the structure at the ground. So, and then hopping, of course, means hopping. So it's like being ground hopping is to be a football tourist. And so that's what that's what I am and what we encourage people to be. And so I was just looking for a name that, even then I had an idea that like, okay, right now I'm doing England, but this could be done for other countries.
For sure.
The ultimate fantasy, I guess I have to say at this point, was to sort of create the lonely planet of world soccer. So wherever you go,
Yeah.
you're going to Colombia, you want to see a game? Well, you need the Groundhopper Guide to Colombian soccer.
Hmm.
We're a
Yeah.
long way from that, I'm afraid. But that's one reason I live in Madrid now, is to start knocking out Spanish clubs.
That idea, right? Of course, you have people in the States. Some people might go to different baseball stadiums, football
Sure.
stadiums, but the general nature of just how big of a country we've got
Yeah.
makes it a little tougher. The whole like away fan traveling is much less common. Whereas in
Right.
places like the UK, where most stadiums are a few hour train ride, right? Or all
Yeah.
over Europe, it's so much more common. It's like, hey, we can get there and back in a day, or maybe
Yeah.
people charter like a big bus together or a van, and somebody's driving in the morning, somebody takes you back. So it's a much more common sense there. But I think absolutely, and as a youth soccer coach, I'm in touch with a lot of families, and now so many people when they do their trips to England, if they're in London, well, they want to catch Arsenal or they want to catch Spurs, or if they're going to Spain or Germany, they're trying to tack on a match or a stadium tour within that. which is so
Mhm.
cool to see because it's become so much more common to see it grow in popularity. Now we look at things like Welcome to Wrexham has had such an impact. It's opened that up. Like I've got a kid that I coach who has a Wrexham top, and they went to England last year. Well, Wales, right? And they went to a Wrexham match, and now they know what promotion relegation is, or to your
Yeah.
point, like the FA Cup and those elements. So it's so cool to see that kind of we're at this place where not only is travel much more accessible and there's a lot of information out thanks to like what you're doing with the Groundhopper guides, that people can kind of get a hang on it. But I can speak, even being someone who's traveled a lot, who's gone to matches in different places, it's still not an easy task, whether it's
That's true.
planning it, whether it's finding tickets, whether it's just getting there on the day. So what are some of those trickier elements of the match day experience that could be tough for someone who wants to go to London or wants to come to Madrid? What are some of those things they need to know, and what might be some potential pitfalls?
Well, the core difficulty at the big clubs is always getting tickets, and especially getting legitimate tickets, and we always tell people that what everybody wants is they want a good seat, they want at a reasonable price, and a guarantee that they're not getting ripped off. And we
Hmm.
always say you can choose any two of those, right? But at the big clubs, you're not getting all three. So yeah, if somebody says they got really good seats at a Liverpool game for a low price, I would be very suspicious,
Yeah.
Um, and just because there's so much demand at these big clubs that, you can go to the Chelsea website and you will never in your life see tickets for sale on the Chelsea website. So like, now what? Right. And so now you're into this great unknown world. And so we deal only in completely official tickets, and we can get into the details of what that means. But, you know, there's nobody on the street outside Chelsea selling tickets. It's much more
Right.
illegal in the UK.
Hmm.
StubHub and all that kind of stuff, very gray area, Wild West, etc. So getting the tickets is one thing, and having peace of mind that you're going to get to the turnstile and actually walk into the stadium. That's a thing. And then there's the schedule. Like in the United States, they release the NFL schedule or whatever. That's the schedule. You know, we have people say, "Hey, we're coming for spring break and we want to go to games on March the 15th." And we're like, "All right, so that game could be anywhere from the 14th to the 17th. We won't know that till
Hmm.
January, but that's also the League Cup final is that weekend. And so the semifinals are a month before that. So if anybody makes that game, then the March game is going to be in April, but we have tickets to
Yeah.
Wembley and you can just watch Americans just heads explode. Like what? But it
Hmm.
says here that it's Saturday at 3. Like, oh, I know. Yeah. And other countries are worse. Portugal makes these adjustments like 2 weeks ahead of the game. And so it's just madness. So there's tickets, there's when are the games actually going to occur? And then for a lot of people, there are people that come to us and say, well, I'm a Chelsea fan. I want to see Chelsea. Or I see Arsenal's playing Tottenham. I want to go to that game. Other people come to us and say, I don't really care. I just want to go to a fun place, and
Yeah.
preferably not spend $800 to go see Arsenal play Tottenham. But, so what places are good? Because people want to have a good, fun experience. And so the other thing we bring then is that, like, if you name a club in England, I've probably been there, right? And so I can tell you that, like, you've never heard, perhaps, maybe now you've heard of Burnley, right? Because they've been in the
Right.
Premier League. You might not have heard of Blackburn Rovers, right? But now they're in the same league. And if they play each other and you can get to that game, you need to go to that game. Like, and people, why? Like, because they're 12 miles apart and they hate each other and they have to bring in police from other cities to help
Hmm.
manage the situation. I'm like, that's a game you want to see. So having that knowledge, of just like, well, what would be fun, you know,
Exactly.
and what would not? People come to us and say, well, I see that Reading is near England. I'm like, yeah, don't go to Reading. It's all due respect if there's any Reading fans listening here, but they'd probably agree. It's a
Right.
boring
If
stadium on
you've
the
got
edge
your
of
one
town.
week
And
of vacation,
yeah,
right? Like, and you've got your time in the UK, Reading's maybe not the one. But to your point, there's such like nuance, and it takes that background knowledge of not only of just knowing the game in particular. Like I could sit here and say, oh, I know some of the derbies, right, or rivalry matches. This might be a good one. This might be a good
yeah,
one. You're saying the actual lived experience of having been to the stadium, felt the atmosphere, knowing like just little details. It could be just like the overall feeling or safety of an area. It could be how to get to the stadium. It could be, like you said, the particular match. It could be certain times a year. Like, for example, the only time I've been to Spain was in Barcelona. And obviously my dream as a football fan was to see Barcelona play, which I got to do. And it was probably the most underwhelming experience I've ever had in a football stadium. And there was some context to that because
Uh-huh.
one, it's a big tourist draw anyway. So I was in
Yeah.
the second level where it was mostly tourists. So not much atmosphere there. So you're thinking of 40, 50,000 people, almost half the whole stadium being tourists with not that same connection, not knowing the songs, not knowing when to sing, what to react to. And this was the kind of cool part, but it was like the week after they had clinched the title and they were
Mm.
playing like a no name, I think it was like Valladolid, someone who was getting relegated, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was so built up in my head, like this is going to be the thing. And was it cool? Am I glad I did it? Do I regret it? No, but that's a great example where it's not necessarily always the biggest, the best that are going to be that experience maybe that you're looking for.
And yeah, I mean, even things like that, we've had, this season and all of last season, they're playing in the old Barcelona Olympic Stadium because they're rebuilding
Mm-hmm.
the Camp Nou. We've had people come to us that didn't know that. And I'm not making fun of people, but they're just like, oh, we got to go to Barcelona. I'm like, well, okay, we can do that, but they're not playing in the stadium that you've seen on television. Right.
Yeah.
They're in a beautiful stadium on top of the hill, the old Olympic Stadium, and it's
Mm-hmm.
very nice, but it's not that. And
Yeah.
but the
Yeah. So
atmosphere
there's,
too, that's a funny thing. Again, if you've got a week in Madrid and you want to see Real Madrid, then you should 100% you should go see Real Madrid, and I'm not going to be the one to tell you that like, oh, well, this is a Sunday evening game against Real Betis, and Wednesday they play Bayern Munich in the Champions League. So you're not going to see Mbappe, Vinny Jr., any of those guys. They're not
yeah.
playing, and they're still going to win by 4, and the crowd's going to be in their seats the entire game, not singing, because that's just what's going to happen at Real Madrid that night. But the flip side is, I got to go because I live here now. I went to the semifinal game against Bayern Munich here when they scored 2 in injury time to win it. And I was in the 600 level and people in tears hugging each other,
Yeah.
stayed in the stadium for 45 minutes after the game singing. Never seen an atmosphere like that in my life. So it can be a library and it can be a church. It's like, you never know. That's one
Yeah.
reason we go because you don't know what the hell's going
Exactly.
to happen,
Exactly. But it speaks to like what you guys are able to offer and knowing those little nuances and details because it's
Yeah.
not so standard as we might expect. So
Yeah.
um kind of speaking about that, I shared mine where it's maybe a little underwhelmed. Could you share you kind of had some highlights. What have maybe been some snafus, some things you weren't expecting, maybe some you don't have to name names necessarily, but maybe some kind of experiences you weren't quite expecting.
Well, I guess the first one that comes to mind is actually Manchester City, which is funny because apparently we're not alone in this. We sell more tickets to Manchester United than we do to Manchester City. And that's pretty easy to understand because 90% of our client base is American. Most Americans started paying attention around 10 years ago, mainly when it hit
Hmm.
NBC. And, 10 years ago, City was a large British club with a big following and a nice stadium that hadn't won anything for 40 years. So, but Manchester United 10 years ago was this behemoth,
Hmm.
and so Americans love a winner. And so they go with Manchester United. So Manchester City has become obviously this juggernaut, right?
Right.
On the field, there's only Real Madrid rivals them in how well they play. But man, that stadium can just be dead sometimes. It really can. Because they've gotten to the point, I think, that Real Madrid has gotten to where like we know we're going to win and we're going to win. Everybody here knows that we're going to win this game, right? So what is there to get excited about? We're just going to sit here and wait for us to
The
win.
mystery's gone, right? Yeah.
Kinda, yeah, most of the time. And every time Manchester City walks on the field, they are heavy favorites until the last 2 or 3 rounds of Europe, or if they're at Liverpool or someplace like that. But at
Hmm.
home, it's just going to work. We're going to go out and
Yeah.
win this game and get on with it, you know. But otherwise, you know, some places, you know, one thing I did when I found out, do you know what it means to do the 92? So,
Yes, the four
okay.
four
Yeah, the
level. Yeah,
top
but please
four
explain it for
divisions.
everybody listening.
Yeah, okay. So the top four divisions there, at any given time, there's 92 teams in there. There's 20 in the Premier League and then 24 in the three divisions of the Football
Hmm.
League, which is Championship, League One, League Two. So yeah, if you watch Welcome to Wrexham, you've heard all about promotion and relegation, and they
Yes.
needed to get back in the league, etc. So the Football League has 72 teams, Premier League has 20. There's 92 teams. So to do the 92 among groundhoppers is this thing where you know, that you've been to a game at all of the current 92 clubs. Okay. Um, there's a club that you join, etc. Right. So when I heard about this, I just have this thing in my brain that was like, well, I'm going to do that. As soon as I heard about it, I thought, all right, that's my goal. And it took 9 years, and I completed it last year. So
Wow.
what that means is that occasionally, you know, you hadn't been to Colchester United yet, and it's Tuesday, and they're playing, you know, Bradford City, and so you're going to go to Colchester on a Tuesday night in February, and it's going to be about 4 degrees above freezing and raining, and there's going to be 2,700 people out there just sitting there with their arms folded, like, what the hell are we
Hmm.
doing here? And you're going to check Colchester United off the list, go back home. But I mean, that's an example where that stadium is hard to get to. And so from the train station, I got in line for a taxi, right? And these two other guys were in line and they looked like football people. And I said, oh, you know, you guys going to the game, let's share a taxi. Turns out one of them is like a pretty high ranking officer at another League Two club, like the chief of scouting or something. And the other guy was just his
Interesting.
buddy that lives in the area. So now I'm sharing a taxi with a League Two scouting chief because that's what happens at a League Two game, right? Is that you
Hmm.
find yourself just talking to these guys about their jobs and their lives and whatever, you know, what players they're here to look at, etc. And so, yeah, terrible stadium, totally uninteresting club. Nothing interesting has ever happened there, as far as I know. But it was still, there's that thing that happens, right? Like, oh,
Uh-huh.
I'm in a taxi with, you know, these guys. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of times where you're just like, all right, you know, I'm going to go out to Grimsby and I'm going to go to Grimsby town. And, you know, but what I try to do then is like, who's their rival? Okay. Their rival, they got Lincoln City and they got Scunthorpe. Okay. I see they're playing Scunthorpe. That's the game I'm going to.
Let's
So
do it. Yeah.
I'll take that 3.5 hour train from Manchester to the end of the freaking world and sit out there in Grimsby and go to that game.
And again, like you've just showcased in the last 2 minutes, these very Lord of the Rings fantasy names don't stop, especially when it comes to the English Football League, your Grimsby's,
Right.
Scunthorpe. They're great. My
Yeah.
my club actually, which I'm going to be curious about, my club is Port Vale actually, so
Oh,
which is
yeah.
also a very
How did you pick Port
proud
Vale?
name. That's a
Why
good
Port
question.
Vale?
So I have it was a family connection. Part of it is just wanted, I have to be that guy. I've got to be that like hipster guy who's like, oh, I
Sure.
can't, of
Right.
course, when I first got into football, it was United and like
Sure.
Barcelona and that. Um, but yeah, it's family connection. So my family is from Stoke-on-Trent area originally,
Oh,
and
okay.
then I'd gone over. This was 2010. Went over to England for the first time, met like distant cousins and everything there, and went to a Vale match. It was, there it's
Oh,
either Stoke City or Vale, and Vale happened to be within walking distance, and we're playing at home. So went to a Vale match, and then from then I was kind of hooked. So I've been following them for a while,
okay.
and then pretty cool. I think was it the summer before, I learned actually that my great great grandfather played in the reserves for Port Vale in like 1888, 78,
Wow.
something like that. Ridiculous. That
Yeah.
another family member had kind of dug up, and they've got newspaper clippings, or he's listed, and yeah, really cool. So yeah,
Huh.
so that's my club now, but very
Okay.
similar. It's not necessarily the first place people would go, and I always tell English people, yeah, I've been to Stoke to Vale, and they say why, right? It's not like on high on the
Right.
tourist lists or anything,
Right.
as I'm sure you can attest. But 100%, it's like, so there's an element of, hey, it's this club, it's this particular stadium, And there's certainly kind of this pantheon of stadiums at any level, really. They've kind of got different prestige, and but it really is kind of on the day, who you meet, the little things that you can't plan for, you can't expect, right? That can really make it
Right.
magical.
Yeah. Yeah. And a random fact. Well, first of all, Port Vale, good trivia questions. The only club not named for a geographic location. So there you go.
Right. Yep.
There is no
Yep.
place called Port Vale. um, Great old stadium. I mean, it's a goofy stadium because parts of it are new, but the parts that are old are proper old. And I enjoy a good old stadium, you know. When I went there, I can't even remember who they were playing, but I'm there and it's, waiting for the game to start and the teams come out and they proceed to play. Do you know what song they play? Their pregame anthem that they
The
sing?
pregame, I know a couple. I don't know clear enough to know.
Yeah.
Is it the Wonder of You, Elvis Wonder of You?
Exactly. The
That's
greatest
right.
Elvis
Yep.
Presley song of all time. And being a kid from Memphis, I'm like all
Oh
in on
yeah.
Elvis, right? And so they start singing The Wonder of You. And I was like, what is
Yeah.
happening? I love all the random songs that people play, but yeah, hearing The Wonder of You was really something. So
And Burzum
yeah.
still brilliant. Yeah.
The weirdest one, by the way, is at Tranmere Rovers, a league. I think they're back in League Two now, kind of in the Liverpool
I think so.
area.
Yep.
They come out to the theme from the Rockford Files. Chew on
Interesting. I
that
don't even know
one.
what that is. I'm gonna
Oh,
have to
that's a
find that.
1970s or 80s detective TV show in America with James Garner as Jim Rockford.
So
And
I'm imagining like a suspenseful kind of
kind of more of a slightly funky, rocking kind of instrumental groove.
interesting.
Yeah. And apparently it goes back to sometime back in the day when their owner decided, let's try to get some bigger crowds. So they moved some games to Friday night and attendance went down. And
Hmm.
he made a joke about, like, I guess everybody'd rather stay home and watch the Rockford Files than come out and see Rovers play. So at their next home game back on Saturday, the PA guy thought he'd be funny and played the Rockford Files. You just stuck the microphone in front of the speaker and put the record on and played the Rockford. And they won the game. And they're like, well, all
There it
right, that's
is.
our song,
Yeah.
40 years later. I remember I turned to the guy next to me and I was like, is that the Rockford Files? Like, what are y'all doing? Yeah, that's what it was.
Amazing. And if you're the type of person that is like, wow, that's an incredible story, and you'd rather hear the Rockford Files theme at Tranmere
Yeah,
than hear the library of the Etihad of Man City, I feel
right.
like that's the type of person that needs to find their way to for sure. So you've been kind of saying like, obviously some of the problems that you guys help solve, but
Mm.
like what are like, let's say I'm sitting here, I'm planning my week's vacation to England or to Spain. Like, how can you guys help us? Like questions, aspects of the trip. You mentioned getting tickets, but what other services do you guys provide?
We really combine three different things, which are the tickets, like I said, are all official and guaranteed. With the knowledge that we have gained, literally how to get to the stadium, what pub you want to go to beforehand, that kind of stuff. So tips and tricks, and then just really good customer service, like all along the way. If you got a question, somebody says, hey, there's no train to Southampton that day. And we'll be like, that's because it's Boxing Day and there's no trains between cities. So let me introduce you to National Express and you can take a bus, so that kind of literally on the ground knowledge.
Hmm.
Yeah, as much even to the extent that you can pay us for some consulting time and sit down and go through your entire itinerary, answer all your questions, make suggestions, which often is like, yeah, we don't sell tickets to Portsmouth, right? But if you can get yourself down to Portsmouth and get tickets, here's why you would want to go to Portsmouth
Right.
and other things to do while you're down there. And occasionally we put together what we call a group ground hop. We might buy a block of tickets at a game and then say, okay, if you want to buy into this block of tickets, I'm going to get us a table at the pub down the street and throw some food on the table and buy a round of beers. And we'll all do that beforehand. And I know a couple of Chelsea fans, I'll bring them over and we'll have that experience. And then we'll all go sit together at the game. We sell tickets at probably 40 clubs around Europe, and I've been to quite a few of those as well and live in Madrid now. And I think we have partnerships now at 11 Spanish clubs.
Awesome. And what are some good ways? I know you guys have the website, which we're going to link to in the descriptions wherever you guys are listening or watching this episode. We'll have the website there. But any other ways to kind of get some information or keep in touch with what you guys have going on?
That's really the biggest thing is, yeah, groundhopperguides.com. And you can sign up. We do a newsletter every couple of weeks. You can sign, that's free, of course. And there's a book. Well, I did, in fact, write the book. And we update it every year. And that is actually available on Amazon, or it will be once we get it finished. So that's another thing you can. But if you buy tickets from us, you get access to the book and everything
Okay.
in the book.
If anybody's planning their trip, whether it's coming up soon or in the future, like we've said, there's so much complexity to things. I've experienced this in so many places. It takes a lot of work, a lot of time. You think you know what you're doing. Like in my case, there's been a lot of, like I shared with my Barcelona story. It doesn't always come out quite the way you thought it, because I didn't have certain context and nuanced information. So definitely, guys, get in touch with Paul and reach out to Groundhopper to make that trip a little bit easier for you guys. And because there's so much that we might not know that is out there and is an option beyond just the big names of the players, the clubs. There's so much that football in Europe and those smaller communities and smaller clubs really has to offer. I think it's so cool and unique. So awesome, Paul. Well, the way that we like to wrap up each episode, all right, is could you please complete the sentence, because football ...
Oh, because football is everywhere. Especially in the Americas and in Europe, there is not a town small enough that this weekend there's somebody's playing and somebody is going to be out there watching. And so if you want to connect with people in the local community, figure out where that game is, learn anything you can about that club, go down there and watch the game. Especially, even at the biggest clubs, like, yeah, you were surrounded by tourists at Barcelona, right? But what if you had known the words to the Barcelona anthem, or even know something about the other team, or anything, just get as much information as you can and then turn to the person next to you and say, were you here when Nottingham Forest beat Liverpool? Were you at the Oldham Manchester United semifinal? And get them to tell you stories and
Yeah.
watch what happens.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you so much, Paul. This has been a great episode. Birds of a feather, we are for sure, and a lot of parallels in our story. So cool. Appreciate your time to sit down with us. And everyone, please, again, check out the website, sign up for the newsletter. I just did myself because I want to stay up to date on what you guys are working on. And again, thank you all for watching and listening to the episode, and we'll see you on the next one.